Hi, this is Shauna. Before we get to today's guest, I want to take a minute to learn more about you, the listener. We've put together a short survey at fueltalent.com/podcast to gather information on who's listening and to give you a chance to make suggestions and comments about the show. I want What Fuels You to be a great resource for you and your interests, and I hope these interviews give you practical advice along with inspiration for your career and life. Help us continue to serve you better by going to fueltalent.com/podcast. Thank you so much. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Derrick Morton. Derrick is the co-founder and CEO of Seattle-based FlowPlay, and has been an entrepreneur, leader, and innovator in the digital entertainment industry for more than 25 years. At the helm of FlowPlay for the last 15 years, he has established the company as the creator of the industry's most powerful immersive gaming platform, driving product innovation to build the engaging multiplayer social casino that captures the attention of 75 million users worldwide. Derrick has identified new opportunities in untapped markets, including free-to-play sports betting and fantasy sports gaming. Over time, Derrick has spearheaded the development of more than 200 digital entertainment projects. Welcome, Derrick. So good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
I always say, I don't know why I say us, so joining me.
It's the world. I'm joining the world.
Joining our listeners. Okay, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire to start us off.
Okay,
super curious, which of these games is your favorite? I'm sure you ask this all the time.
Oh man. Oh, which of our games?
Yeah, your games.
Oh gosh, they're a
each
lot
a
of
baby.
similarity.
I'm sure it's like comparing children, right?
Well, I mean, my current baby that I think is kind of the future of the company. We just launched a Hard Rock World Tour. It's a partnership with Hard Rock hotels and casinos. Launched it on Monday.
Oh.
So it's a pretty important partnership for us, and I think it sort of reflects where we think the company's going in terms of doing partnerships with big land-based casinos and doing social casinos for them. And we're trying to bridge that gap between what you do online and what you do on land.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay, I know you're a musician, so I'm curious who your favorite band is.
Oh my God. Well, this will date me. I guess like Talking Heads is one of my favorite bands in terms of my favorite albums and things. I'm seeing Billie Eilish on Friday.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually got invited to that concert, but I can't go. But that'll be great. She's talented. So speaking of concerts, what was your favorite concert you've ever attended?
Oh my God! You should have warmed me up with these.
No, these are rapid fire. But you can take a pause. We can always edit. We can always edit our podcast.
21 Pilots puts on an amazing show. So one of my favorite shows, and I've seen them 3 times, and all 3 times they were great.
Oh, that's great. I need to listen. I don't know who that is, and I should. Right. I feel like whenever music comes up or anything that's like cool that I don't know, and I always think I'm slightly cool, I'm like, there's a gap here. I need to look into it.
Any band that's come up in the past 10 years, I was introduced to by my kids.
Well, of course. Yeah. Yeah. So do you play board games?
I do play a lot of board games.
And so which one's your favorite board game?
Our go-to is, Croissant is one that's super fun, and everybody, it's easy to learn and easy to play. What is the other German one?
I don't know. Have you ever played Cranium? I had Richard Tate on here, the founder of Cranium. That's a fun game.
It's a fun game. It's not.
Uh-oh.
you can't be competitive and kick the butt of the other
Yeah.
player.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if you could be famous, I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but I'm curious. If you could be a famous rock star, movie star, athlete, gamer, or writer, which one would you choose?
Ooh, probably rock star, although rock stars really have terrible lives.
I know. And you would be the guitarist?
Yeah, I've been the front man. Was my
Nice.
most of my band experience, front man guitar player.
So you can sing?
I, I can a bit, yeah.
And do you have a good karaoke go-to song?
Uh, um, yes. Born to be Wild is
Nice.
my go-to. Yeah.
Awesome. I always like to try to remember to put those in my notes because when it comes time and you're ready to karaoke,
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
oh, what's my karaoke song? So I think it's a good thing to have. Okay, so if you could have any superpower, which one would you choose?
I'd like to fly.
Nice. So that you could just like go the feeling of flying or so you could travel.
I don't like being in traffic. Yeah, so I can just go somewhere with complete
Yeah.
freedom and not have to depend on other people.
Yeah. Okay, final question. I know you're a big backpacker and you go on these solitude and fun, cool excursions and trips. Where is your favorite place to go backpacking?
Mount Rainier is great.
Is that where you go every time?
Not every time, no, but I've been there a lot. I've done the Wonderland Trail that goes around Mount Rainier twice.
And how long is that?
83 miles.
Oh my gosh. Wait, what? And so you're just like sleeping along the way, it's flat?
Yep. No, it's 27,000 feet elevation gain. So you actually gained enough altitude to climb Mount Everest from sea level.
Oh my gosh. And you've summited, right?
I've tried to summit twice and got turned back by weather both times.
Oh my gosh. We have good friends who have summited, but I know a lot of people who have gotten turned away with weather. That's got to be just painful, all the training, but still an incredible and bonding experience. Okay, so where did you learn to, I guess, your interest in the outdoors? Where are you from? Where were you raised?
Boy, I'm an Air Force brat, so I lived all over. I lived in Germany till I was 6. Then we moved back to Texas, and then I moved to Alaska. So I guess my love of the outdoors really came about of living in Alaska. I had a snowmobile. So as a young kid, I was like, 10 years old, and I could hop on my snowmobile and just take off into the woods and go see caribou and moose and all kinds of wildlife. And we lived on the edge of a big woods. So that was probably what really kicked it off.
Yeah. And did you, I guess, play any sort of sports or like, how did you spend your free time outside of school and snowmobiling?
Really playing music. That was my one thing I did consistently from like the time I was 10 years old was just play guitar and hang out in my room and, try and learn people's songs.
I always love hearing like how people ended up learning it because I've tried to create musicians out of my kids, and my husband plays guitar, but none of my kids play an instrument. And I just think it's such an incredible talent. And I see my husband, he uses it as like a true escape, if he just wants to chill out. And it seems like the best way to do that.
Yeah, it's like meditation because you're just focused on what you're playing. And so everything else sort of goes away.
Yeah. And how do you learn music? Like what's your approach to it?
I download tabs. Tabs are this tablature. It's like the way of putting guitar notes on paper. So I download songs that I want to learn, and then I listen to them on Spotify, and
Yeah, that's the newer way. When you were young, what were you doing? How were you?
Oh, I was just having to listen to them on the radio or something, and then I would have to sort of figure it out.
Yeah, I just think that really is just like, to me, such a talent. And were there musicians in your family?
No, not really. Yeah, nobody in my family was a musician. In fact,
are you an only child, or you have siblings?
No, I'm the oldest of 5, but I'm still the only musician.
Wow. And are you? Is everyone else doing various things, or have they pursued kind of business opportunities like you have?
I'm the only one of the 5 that even went to college. Both my parents didn't even finish high school.
Wow. So these are the stories I love. This is the podcast like energy I get from hearing people that are like, okay, see me now. This is probably, you don't know like where people started and how they ended up and all the influences along the way. So your parents didn't graduate high school, and where are they from?
My mother was from Texas. My dad was from Michigan. He joined the Air Force when he was, a senior in high school, and then my mom when he was stationed in San Antonio.
And so where did the value of, I guess, education come from for you personally?
Part of it was I was always really good in school, and I didn't have to work that hard at it. So I just knew that formal education was going to be good for me, and that it wouldn't be hard for me.
Yeah. And how did you end up getting a scholarship, or did you work, or how did you pay for it? Because USC is expensive.
Yeah, I did. I got a full scholarship to USC.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And how did you know that that's what you wanted to pursue? I know you studied motion picture production, obviously the best place to do it.
Yeah. Well, I actually didn't go to college until I was 25. So I was going to be a rock star. But that was what was going to happen, right? And then around 25, the big event that really changed things was my mother passed away. And it sent me into this sort of like, whoa, what am I doing here? What's my life about? Gave me a real sense of mortality, because she was only 44.
How did she pass away?
Car accident.
Oh God,
the result,
so sorry.
The event, she didn't die right away, but she received excuse me, really severe injuries that eventually killed her.
Yeah. Oh, that's painful. And those types of things do force you to kind of take stock and figure it out. And so in your pursuit of becoming a rock star, what is that like? You're playing gigs all over, or you're trying to find an agent, or what does that mean when you say you were trying to become a rock star?
Well, I was, I had a band. We made an album, made a couple records. We're giving those to record labels, trying to get signed to a record label. Never happened. And then, like I said, at 25, I sort of re-examined everything and said, you know what, I need to go to college. So
you were in classroom with like 18-year-olds. You're 25.
Yeah. And my mom died in April, and I was back in school in September.
Wow. I'm sure she would have been so proud of you. And what was your dad's take? Was he kind of like, what did he want for you? Or was that not a clear message?
He didn't get it at all.
Yeah. He was like, what are you doing? Go make some money.
What's the point? Go get a job.
Yeah. How did you know kind of how to navigate that? Did you have anybody kind of mentoring you or leading you? A lot of kids are like, especially today, have the helicopter parents with the tutors and the counselors, like showing them the way.
Yeah, I think that was part of the issue. Growing up, I really didn't have any role models around higher education or being part of the business world or anything like that. I certainly didn't know anybody that was a computer programmer or made video games or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure. And are your siblings, I guess, and your friends from childhood surprised to see where you've ended up? Or is it like, oh yeah, we always had our money on this guy?
I think my family always figured something was going to happen. My brother tells me all the time, oh yeah, I always knew you're going to be a big deal, whatever. Friends, probably not so much, because, there was a side of myself that I never showed to my friends because I wanted to be cool and didn't want to be a nerd, right?
Yeah, of course. I think it's amazing when you hear about schools where it is like actually cool to be super smart and curious. And when I hear about kids dumbing themselves down, which you hear about all the time, it's just crushing.
I was guilty of that.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so you pursued school at 25, went to USC. Were you thinking like, hey, I'm going to pivot here and go into film production?
Oh yeah, that was my next big thing. So if I wasn't going to be a rock star, I was going to be Steven Spielberg, right?
Dream big. I love it. Did you go straight from there to get, I just kind of, when I was researching you, I know you went back and got an MBA. Was that straight out of USC?
No. So I got a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree from USC, and then went and started, working.
Okay. I was trying to figure out that timeline, because I know you worked for many years in Los Angeles in production and product and marketing, but I couldn't figure out where in there was the MBA. And then my reason for even being curious is I was just like, why? Like some people, when they go back and get an MBA, are because they just don't know what else to do. Others are like, hey, I need this for my career. I need the network. What was the impetus for you?
So yeah, I didn't start my MBA program until 10 years after I got my master's degree from SC in film production. And it was mostly because and all the jobs I had, I was seen as like, okay, yeah, Derrick, you're the creative guy, but and I kind of rose to the limit of where I could get to as a creative in the organizations I was in. And so nobody took me seriously as like a
Right,
guy
the
who
business
knew
guy.
the P&L or anything like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Do you still feel like that's your weak spot, or have you just learned it? Or like for me, that's always been like, God, I should have probably gotten an MBA, because still I have to have someone explain my P&L to me every month. And I'm like, it's a weak spot, but I'm like, well, whatever. I just double down on where I'm strong. But how do you feel now, this many years into your career?
Well, after being a CEO for 15 years, I pretty much have it down now.
Yeah.
When I was green and raw and just starting my company, yeah, I needed help figuring it out. But 15 years later, it's
Yeah.
my thing.
Yeah, it's your thing. So you stayed in there a little while in Irvine after you graduated, right? After
Yeah.
you finished your MBA.
Uh-huh.
And tell me about some of these companies that you worked for, as far as the successes and the kind of like, oh, this isn't the right company for me. I know you had several that were like a couple years. I see that through the lens of a recruiter, which is either that
Sure.
you're getting recruited out, or you're just like unsatisfied.
Yeah, so my first big break was going to work for a company called Graphic Zone. Graphic Zone was started by Warner Brothers in the early 90s, with the vision to make all music interactive. So it was sort of the perfect thing for me. They're working with bands to make interactive CDs where you could explore the band's background, explore them personally, see their homes. So we did one with Prince. We did one.
Oh my gosh!
Did one with Bob Dylan.
Prince is top 5 for me. I would have like died for that.
Yeah. And so we were doing all these. I got to tour with Willie Nelson for 2 weeks to do one on him. So it was super fun and super engaging. But and the company actually went public, and I was the VP of production, so I ran all of the actual production of the projects. But by 1999, though, once the internet started coming along, nobody really needed CD-ROMs of music interactive. You could just get all that interactive stuff online. So that company actually went out of business in 1999.
Yeah.
So I had to find a new gig. And the next one was this company called iWin, which is doing some really fun stuff. They were a game company, but really sort of more of an advertising-based game company. We became the 6th most trafficked website in the world because we were selling and buying clicks like crazy. They raised like $25 million. It was the go-go internet days.
Yeah, and that was in Los Angeles, right? So
yes,
you moved out there to Los Angeles. And so what was your job search process like? Were you strategic about it? Like, hey, this is what I want to do, and these are the top 10 companies that do it? Or was it like, hey, I was sitting there at a restaurant and I met this guy who suddenly started talking? Like, I just always love hearing how people's lives have unfolded.
It's sort of crazy. I've never interviewed for a job where somebody hadn't called me up and said, hey, you should check out this job at my company. It has an opening for, a friend of a friend or a direct friend. So I've never sent in a resume blind to a company.
So mostly getting referred in, not getting recruited by a recruiter, but more like, hey, I got a guy who knows another guy and we think you'd be perfect for this.
Yes.
Wow. And have you ever not gotten a job that you've wanted?
I'm sure I haven't gotten a job that I've wanted, but I don't recall. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been over 20 years since I had to interview for a job.
My career has been the same as yours. Like, I've never actually interviewed for a job or sent in a resume. Yeah. It's been like someone knows me or got recruited. So yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's funny because you hear these stories and I'm like, first of all, why are you going in cold? I'm like, right. It's never a good idea.
Find somebody.
Find somebody or something, or write something creative to the CEO or someone to make yourself stand out, because it's super tough. And so over time, I know that you worked, so Vivendi, tell me about that company.
Oh, wow. So the company I described to you, iWin, was purchased by a company called Uproar, but very quickly on the heels of that was purchased by Vivendi. So
so those were acquisitions. Yeah, I read about all of them. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So that's why the series of what looks like job changes was really just acquisitions.
Okay, got it. So you were part of that, where starting to go to a new company. And what was your experience like as an employee, as far as experiencing that culture-wise? Like, sometimes employees are like, uh-oh, things are going to change. My boss is going to change, or they may do layoffs, or I don't like the new leadership.
I hated it. I don't like working for large companies. I like working for startups and small companies.
Yeah.
I like having ownership over more things. I like knowing the people that are making the decisions and having some input on those decisions. And once we were bought by Vivendi, literally people in Paris were deciding what we should do.
Right. Totally out of touch with exactly what's going on in the business.
Yeah. I mean, Vivendi is a water company in France, and they started just buying up all kinds of entertainment assets, and they had no idea what to do with them.
Yeah, those stories are always interesting. And so Gamehouse was kind of the next stop.
Yeah, so I was licensing games from Gamehouse. They were, a super cool studio up here in Seattle, about 15 people at the time. And I really enjoyed working with the guys. In fact, Ron from Gamehouse, I'm going to see next week in Palm Springs. We're super great friends. So Ron mentioned that, they might need some help in marketing and actually switching from a B2B business to a B2C business. So I said, yeah, man, I'm out of here. Get me away from Vivendi.
How did you know him to begin with? Like, you're in LA, he's in Seattle. How did you?
I was licensed. I was licensing games from them. I had met him at a conference.
You just met him at a conference. Okay.
And so we were doing business together. And I also wanted to get out of LA. My kids were starting to hit the age where they'd be going to public school, and the public school options in LA were not very good.
Yeah.
So
were you targeting, was it a Gamehouse created the opportunity for Seattle, or was it like it all aligned because Seattle fit like a city where you'd want to raise kids?
Well, my wife's actually from Seattle as well.
Oh, so nice. So it's a win-win-win.
It really fit.
That's perfect. And so if I researched properly, it sounds like then Gamehouse was acquired by Real Networks.
Yep.
So another acquisition. Real Networks, obviously a very famous Seattle company with lots of leaders coming out. There's a whole article written, a few years ago about it. What was your take on your experience at Real Networks?
Honestly?
Yeah. Well, be careful. You're on a podcast. At least my mom might listen. I don't know who else is going to listen. Maybe your family.
I mean, it was another experience where, I was no longer at a startup. So
yeah,
just at that level, it was not as fun for me. And it also turned out that I became the one, and from Gamehouse, who was doing all the reporting in to the mothership.
And you're like, I don't really want to do that job.
So, those, I'm not sure what you know about Real Networks and its operations, but there can be some brutal meetings.
Well, so I've heard that, and that's why I'm curious. And I have had some people on the podcast out of Real Networks, and it sounds like it was a little bit of like, those were the good old days, early days, but also the culture sounds pretty intense. And so I think as you're forming a company, you're thinking about those experiences. Like, I want to create a company that I would want to work at. You know what I mean?
It's exactly what my partner and I, Doug, discussed. Is like, when we start this business, how do we make it a place where we want to work?
Yeah. Well, I love the stuff that I read about your culture. I think you've done an incredible job at FlowPlay of creating a sticky culture where people want to stay, and you've had an amazing tenure. But before we get into that, I'm curious about the idea. So you mentioned Doug, your co-founder, Doug Pearson.
Yep.
How did you guys know each other? How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so while working at Gamehouse, Microsoft contacted us, and we're curious about if we would be willing to take one of our small games that we made for the internet and put it on a phone for them. They had this nascent phone device and phone operating software that they wanted to launch, but they wanted to launch it with a game on it. And this is, nobody was really making mobile games at that time.
Right.
And we didn't know what to do, but we had heard about this guy, Doug Pearson, really smart, PhD, could probably figure out anything. And so we hired him to make this game for us called Bounce Out. And he did an amazing job. And so once Real Networks bought us, based on that, they made me head of mobile games. So I started, being in charge of making mobile games for Real Networks, and Doug was the natural person to go to start doing the outsourced production, because we didn't have a team yet, so everything was outsourced. And Doug and his team built about a dozen games for us. And from that experience, I just realized that Doug would be the perfect guy to, to start a company with. And I had a 3-year earnout. And so 2 years into that, I approached Doug and said, "Hey, would you want to start a company with me? I got a year before I'm looking for something else to do besides real networks."
Yeah. And, you hear a lot of stories about co-founders who don't vet each other properly as far as thinking big picture, like, what do we both want out of this? What's our work style? How do we, resolve conflict? Just all of the kind of almost like personality assessments. Did you guys go through any sort of vetting of that? Or was it just like, this is my skill set, this is yours, and we're good to go?
Well, we'd known each other for over a year by that time. And so we kind of knew each other's capabilities. I knew that he was, capable of anything from a technology perspective. And he knew that I was, a business guy and could figure things out on the business side and sort of manage that. And it was something he didn't really enjoy doing. He was running his own company, but it wasn't the part of the business that he liked to deal with.
Right. But the complementary skill set part is the part that I was saying most likely you've already dealt with. But what about all of the assessments of each other's, ability to weather the storm of like the feeling of a startup and just stomach it? And, are our spouses and our families on board with this? And what's our appetite for risk? Just all of the things that you go through as a startup.
So we met once a week for a year before we started FlowPlay. Just to talk this kind of stuff out, like what kind of company do we want to have? What do we want to make? What are the market opportunities? And I think we probably didn't quiz each other specifically about personality issues or what he was good at, what I was good at, but that you learn that stuff along the way.
Yeah, just how to deal with conflict resolution and all that. And so walk me through those early days of FlowPlay. Like, how did you come up? I love the name. How did you come up with the name?
Well, there's a very famous book called Flow, and I happened to be reading it right at the time that we were looking for a name for the company. And so it just sort of came together. We were testing out all kinds of names. There's a spreadsheet somewhere of like, all the crazy names and like, is the domain available?
Totally.
How much is the domain? All this stuff that you do when you're trying to come up with a name, who's trademarked what.
And so was this one just available, flowplay.com?
It was.
That's lucky. Well, I guess your early days, your company's been around for a little while, but still, like it's such a cool name. And so how did you go
I don't think we had to pay for it.
That's awesome. I didn't have to pay for Fuel Talent either, which was like shocking. We literally tested like hundreds of names. And so how did you fund the business originally?
Well, because of the couple of acquisitions I'd been through, I had a little bit of a war chest of my own. And Doug did as well. So we pulled together $100,000 of our own money just to kick it off. And then I knew, I'd started warming people up for helping me raise some funding during that year period before we actually started the company. And so I had a couple of people teed up to invest in us in this right from the start.
Yeah.
So within the first 6 months, we probably raised $500,000.
Wow, that's amazing. And what was the original idea and business model?
What we saw in the market was that there were these things called virtual currencies, these things called virtual goods, mostly in like places like Korea and China. They weren't very big in the US yet in 2006. And also, people interacting in virtual worlds. So we felt like if we came up with a product that sort of combined those things and where you also played games. So Second Life was around at the time, but there wasn't much to do in Second Life. You could go and you could explore and you could see people, but you couldn't play games there. And we felt like that was a big missing component. So we felt like if you put games in a virtual world with things to dress up in and have your own apartment, things like that, it'd be something incredible.
Well, apparently 75 million other people agree. So something you were on to something. And so what's the business model as far as how you make money?
We sell virtual goods. So originally you would buy hairdos, you would buy clothing. We had, eventually we had 70,000 different things you could buy in our kids game called Our World. And they bought, shoes, outfits, angel wings, halos.
That's awesome. Our World was the first game, right? And then followed 4 years later with Vegas World. And so how did you decide kind of what areas, were you just kind of watching the market and figuring out what was hot? Or, I mean, you were leading the way. Like, how did you decide to go into Vegas world?
Um, I had managed a product in the late 90s and early 2000s called Virtual Vegas, virtualvegas.com. And it was super popular, did really well. And so I figured that was for what we were doing, a really good audience to sort of go back to. It didn't have a virtual world, but it was very chat oriented. So I knew that if you had this virtual Vegas was, you played slots, you played blackjack and poker, but you played with a little thumbnail avatar, and you had chat bubbles and all these things. So I figured it'd be a good audience for us to take a game to, because that was successful.
Yeah. And I know that you reached profitability even before that. Our world was profitable, right? Because that's awesome.
Break even.
Well, break even. And then eventually got some profitability. And so tell me a little bit about the FlowPlay community through some of these games. I mean, getting into also fantasy sports and now Dragon Chain and all the different things that you've done. Like, are these communities kind of parsed out, or do they all overlap? Do people just like gamers or gamers? Are they certain ones kind of only play certain games? I'm not a gamer, so these might be like ridiculous questions. I'm just curious.
Yeah, some people are shocked that our audience is mostly ladies over 50.
Well, I just turned 50, so maybe next year.
For most of our games, it's just, if you walk through a casino, you notice that there's a lot of ladies playing slots. So those are the same kind of ladies that play our games as well. And so people sort of split themselves off in between. There's a hardcore group of people that play slots. There's people that are dedicated to poker, sports betting, blackjack, you name it.
Yeah.
But they all come together as a community in these things we have called parties. So every player in all of our games has some sort of either a hotel suite that they have, or some sort of private space where they can invite people over and have a party. And that's where we make most of our money, and where a lot of the activity in the game is in these hotel suites where people are having parties.
Okay, so what's happening at these parties? And I'm super curious if like actual human beings are meeting like spouses and business partners, and like what are stories coming out of FlowPlay's communities?
So the reason parties came about were, well, they originally started on Our World, our kids game, but for those, the reason to get together was really just to have a party, really just to have fun and get together and hang out with your friends. And it was a way to like let everybody else know, hey, I'm online, come to my condo, let's have a party. But when it came to Vegas World, it was really interesting. We have these things called Lucky Charms, and you can buy them in the game. And when you buy one, everybody in the room with you gets one too. And those Lucky Charms make you win at all of our games. You win more. Like normally a gambling game, you lose about 5% of everything you wager over time. Well, these charms make you win more than 100%, which increases your balance over time. And so if you're in a room with people, you buy a beer, everybody gets that beer, they play for a while, they win, but the beer goes away eventually. So it becomes this virtuous cycle where people continue to buy beers and things so that they continue to win. Well, what the players figured out is if they went to a person's room, you could cram 25 people in there. And now 25 people got that charm all at once instead of just the 5 or 6 that you would normally get. So they thought they were gaming our game by doing this. So they would all pack into a suite, and they would call out each other's names and say, okay, Bob, buy a beer. Judy, buy a beer. Somebody buy a beer. And they would go round and round and round until everybody had bought a charm. And then they'd go back and continue to gamble. And we saw this and we were like, oh my God, we got to build a product around this. So we made a product around allowing people to purchase these charms at parties, made this thing where the more charms you bought, the more crazy charms and benefits you got as well. So that's when the business really started taking off, and we took advantage of that.
That's incredible. And so, my kids are at the age where they're on Snapchat, and they have like streaks where the longer they're on, or the more consistent they're in touch with someone, the better, I guess. They're not making money or anything off of it, but is there that type of thing in the game where it's like they get rewarded for playing more often?
We give you bonuses for consistent play. So if you log in every day for 20 days, 30 days, but there are people who have logged in for 1,000 days in a row or more.
Yeah. And does it ever come up in a criticism way where people are, some people are like anti-gaming because it can be addictive? And so have you ever been approached with someone kind of on the attack?
A couple times people have told us, hey, my mom is playing your game too much. She's spending 12 hours a day on your game. I really need to limit her play. And so we'll help people out like that and limit people's play if they feel like they're having their loved one is having a problem. And even some people have contacted us from time to time, not very many, to say, look, I'm not able to control how long I play your game. Could you please limit me in some way?
Oh,
So we'll
yeah.
do that.
It's like me saying to my husband, like, hide the M&Ms. Yeah, I totally. Like, I have no control with the M&Ms. Like, just put them somewhere.
But to be clear, none of our games require that you spend money to play. None of our games allow you to win money to play. It's all just for fun. There's no actual money that you win.
Right. Yeah, no, of course. Interesting. And so most of the story sounds like pretty fairy tale-ish. Obviously, that can't be true because all startups have like ebbs and flows of, hardship and times. Tell me a little bit about some of the harder times and challenges and how you've overcome those as far as, maybe someone's listening who could use some mentorship right now. Like, don't do this, avoid that.
Well, don't start a company in the middle of the world's biggest recession.
FYI.
Maybe. I mean, maybe it's a good time, maybe it's a bad time, but it was a struggle. So we launched in 2007. Luckily, we raised our first round by December of 2007. But we had anticipated needing to do a follow-on round in the next year or two. And as you know, in 2008, 2009, that was just a terrible time to raise money. So in 2009, we actually had to do I think what has been our only layoffs in the history of the company. So we laid off, I think probably 25, 30% of the staff. Everybody in the company took a 30% pay cut. And Doug and I took no pay for over a year because we could see some light at the end of the tunnel. But we knew we needed more runway to be able to get there. And so.
And when did you do your next round? And how much have you raised total to date?
Well, we never really did another round. We just got through what we needed to get through to get to the point where we broke even and then could start reinvesting and grow the company. So we raised 7.2 million in our Series A.
That's big. That's not nothing.
It's not nothing.
That's not nothing. So I'm sure your investors are psyched. They bet on the right horse.
But I will say one thing we did, which kind of saved the company, was we made a deal with the devil in some ways. We approached a really, really big partner. There's a company called MiniClip, probably not familiar with them, but they're a big deal on internet gaming. And one of the biggest companies in internet gaming at the time. So we approached them and said, if you will put our game on your website, we will split the revenue with you and we'll give you equity in our company.
Ooh.
Because we knew if we could get on their website that it would make or break us. And it did. So we gave them a 50-50 rev share. We gave them, I think, like 5% equity in the company in warrants.
Wow.
But that free traffic is what allowed us to actually, start up again, not have, because we didn't have cash to actually invest in marketing.
Yeah. And who are your kind of go-tos as far as when you're struggling to make decisions? Who do you go to and your own personal or professional board of advisors?
Yeah, my first stop is Michael Schuessler. I'm not sure if you know Michael.
WTIA, love him.
Yeah, so he was actually my boss, my last boss at Real Networks.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's just a good friend and been on my board since we started. He's also an early investor in the company.
Yeah.
So he's an amazing guy. He's always my first call. I also have Mike Slade on my board.
Yeah.
Who's an incredible dude.
Yeah. Those are good ones. Those are great go-tos. And when you're making decisions in general, I mean, you don't have to deal with like venture capital really, right?
Well, Intel was my venture capital group, my institutional investor, but they were only a board observer. They were never actually on the board.
Right.
We're much a small company.
Yeah. And how many employees do you have today?
About 80 total, about 62 here in Seattle.
Yeah. And how has, I guess the last couple of years, I'm guessing it's been good for the business during
Yes.
the pandemic. Great. I mean, everybody's gaming their home. That's what they want to do. How has it been? I know that from day one, you've always been kind of a flexible workplace, more of a hybrid model, which is awesome. I have not heard about that a lot. And so how much has changed for you, or not that much, because your company and your employees are already used to the autonomy?
Yeah, as you pointed out, we were always a Monday, Wednesday, Friday company. Excuse me. As you pointed out, we were always a Monday, Wednesday, Friday company. We work from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So for the whole history of the company for 15 years, that was always the plan. Come to the office on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll have our meetings then, but no meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Just work from home and get your stuff done. So it was a little easier call for us to make in early March of 2020 to say, you know what, things don't look good. Just don't come to the office for a while, and we'll ride this out and see how it goes. And we just happened to be in a place where we had a new product that we were working on. Most of the decisions, creative decisions about that product had been made. So it was super easy for us to just go off and just, okay, let's just get this product done. We know what we need to do. We'll build it and we'll meet over Zoom and it'll just happen. But I think we've suffered because now I see us needing to do some new products. And it's harder to do those sort of like collaborative discussion,
Totally.
creative discussions when you're not in a room together. It's really, Zoom's more transactional. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, John, what about this? Hey,
Yeah.
Bill,
Can you
what about
jump on
this?
real quick just to talk about this one thing? Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
It's harder just to like, think out loud and just go around the room and, gather ideas
and whiteboard and all of that. And so do you have an office still, or you're 100% remote?
We do. I go Monday, Wednesday, Friday still to the office. It's a 12,000 square foot office, and usually it's me and the CFO, and we have a CFO assistant that are there.
And have you done some hiring during the pandemic? Do you have new hires who have never been in that flow of coming in?
Yeah, we have 5 people who've only been to the office once in July when we thought we were coming back to the office.
Yeah.
So for like a 2-week period, those people got to come in the office and see how much fun we were having. And then we were back to like, okay, sorry.
Poof. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing you've hired, or you're thinking about hiring also outside of Seattle, which most companies are starting to do. And
Yep.
It does create it's just shifted everything. I mean, as a person who's been in recruiting for almost 30 years, it's just so different now because it's just flat. People can hire talent from everywhere. Which is
it's been a combination for us. We have 3 people that moved away during the pandemic because they wanted to be closer to family, or one guy got married to a woman in Germany, so he moved to Germany. One guy wanted to move back closer to his family in Missouri with his family. One guy, his wife was from Japan, so she had a baby, so they moved back to Japan to be close to her family. So pretty spread out. And then now when we're hiring, literally we're recruiting now. And we've got a candidate who in Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah, that's a little easier than Japan or Germany as far as working hours.
But we also one in Hawaii.
Wow. So have you just said to the people, hey, as long as you're working like, Seattle hours, you can live anywhere?
Yeah. Well, except for the guy in Japan, we accommodate him a little bit, but generally we ask that you be around and available from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Seattle time.
Yeah, interesting. And I saw that you wrote an article about the pandemic and how it's changed gaming. Can you expand on it? Like, how has gaming changed during this time?
I think gaming has filled a lot of the social needs for people that they didn't have access to during the pandemic. I mean, being able to go online and just feel like you're in the room with other people and feel comfortable about that versus being in a pandemic situation where you really don't want to be in a room full of people, in a crowded room for sure. But because people need to talk to other people, they need
Absolutely.
at least feel like they're around other people.
Totally. And
So
a lot
that's
of
a big
people are
part.
having a hard time even getting back into the swing of that. Like social anxiety is at an all-time high, and all of it. And so how are you, I want to go back to recruiting for 1 second, because there's a question I forgot to ask you about, like, what makes somebody successful at FlowPlay as far as like traits, and how do you screen or vet for that?
Wow. I guess the most important trait we look for is somebody that's collaborative, somebody that doesn't consider themselves a rock star, in the sense that
No divas. Yeah.
yeah, no divas, no big egos. So that's one thing that I look for personally, and I'm sort of the last interview, and that's sort of my job in that last interview is to sort of detect for that.
Yeah, you're like, how do I vet for assholes?
Right, exactly. No asshole policy. Like, yeah. And for me, it's really about, trying to suss out, are they a team player? Do they actually enjoy working on a team? Do they enjoy taking the advice from others and coming up with something collaboratively versus where are they really just a lone wolf and just like to go do things on their own? Because if that's the case, there might be a couple jobs in our company where that's okay, but for the most part, that's not okay.
Yeah. Well, the worst of that is when they think they are, but they're not. And so their sense is that they are, or you've got them leading teams, and then they want to be a lone wolf and in a vacuum and not transparent and collaborative. So that can be tough.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so what about the philosophy around giving back and philanthropy? Is that something that's woven into the culture, or is that top down, like, hey, this is just a priority for us, for the founders? Or do you engage the whole team in that?
We engage the team, but I would say it came from Doug and I in terms of just, hey, especially once it was obvious that we were going to be successful, that there was no turning back, that we would never need to raise money again. It was, obvious to us that like, okay, we need to give some of this back to the community in some way. And part of it came from world events. The first time we ever did a fundraiser inside of our world was the Japanese tsunami. So, those world events sort of made us say, hey, we could use the game to do something cool here for the people that are been rendered homeless by the tsunami in Japan. And so that's what kicked it off really was like world events. We sold sheep inside of our world. You could have a pet sheep, and then we would actually pay for real sheep for people in Africa.
That's amazing. And how do you come up with these ideas? I mean, it's obvious that it's just kind of a part of you being a person of the world and being a generous human, but then like translating that to like executing through the business and bringing in the community. I love that.
Yeah, what it eventually became was since we started doing these things based on world events, but we realized like, hey, let's really let's really codify this. Let's make it a thing that we sort of make some true decisions around. So we polled our community, all the players. We polled our employees, like what are the kinds of foundations, what are the kind of charities that you would be interested in supporting. And so the big one that came up for us was cancer in our ladies over 50. And so we did a couple fundraisers for cancer through the American Cancer Association, sorry. And because of that, I got on their radar, and they like contacted me and said, hey, you're doing a great job. How'd you like to work with us on a different level? So I became the chairperson.
I saw that. I know you got your hands on all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
So you've raised over $400,000, right?
For cancer, yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so is it something that like, do the team members, as far as your employees, all subscribe to this as far as how they live? And is that an important value for the company? As far as, do you give them a day off to volunteer, to give back? Or is it just, I feel good about this? Because I think a lot of, especially millennials and people in their 20s and 30s, when they're looking at jobs, want a feel good aspect to the companies that they're joining.
Yeah, there's a particular event that's actually coming up next month. It's called Fit to Be. It's Fit to Be Free, that the American Cancer Society runs. And what it is people walk and they have their phone measuring how many steps they do. And then they raise money based on the number of steps they do. And I suggested it to the company, and I was sort of like, well, we'll see what people think. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. And it was incredible. Like we had half the company doing it, and they were super competitive because they had these leaderboards that show who's doing the most steps.
How many steps are they getting?
Oh, I think our top person, we were going to donate $10 per mile. And I think our top person did over 100 miles in the couple of weeks that
Oh
that
my
we were running.
gosh.
Yeah, they were just walking everywhere.
Yeah, it's super smart once you start to get intentional and pay attention. I do about if I don't pay attention, it could literally be like 3 or 4 thousand steps, which is ridiculously sad. But yesterday was a woman that I was supposed to have a meeting with was like, let's move our bodies and let's walk. And I was like, oh yay, I hit 10,000 steps. But there's
Yeah,
people who do 20 and 30,000 steps like every day. And it's so healthy for you. It's like, why not do a business meeting and take a walk? Which
no,
was, I know, a big thing during the pandemic. People would, walk and talk. Yeah. So, okay, the big news. So tell me about this acquisition, Wind
yes.
Creek Hospitality. Were you in talks with them for a long time? And was that always the plan? I'm super curious how that came to be.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it was kind of always the plan that we, as entrepreneurs want an exit, right? That's what your investors want. That's why they invest in the company. And for you, it's a great thing. So yeah, you start a company with the idea that someday there'll be an exit for you. And we had been through a couple different processes with bankers, and we did meet the Wind Creek team probably 7 years ago as part of that process. But at the time, we were eking out a couple $1 million in profit. And so we weren't that interesting to them yet. And so probably 2-3 years ago, we'd sort of decided, this might not happen. So let's just start thinking about what that might look like if we just pay dividends to our investors and we do some profit sharing with the employees. And this just becomes a lifestyle business, a good lifestyle business, but, just a lifestyle business. But just about the time we started making that plan and getting things ready, the Wind Creek guys came back to us with interest, because now had gone from a couple $1 million EBITDA company to, a 12 and $15 million EBITDA company.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize those numbers. That's amazing. So they're psyched, and then it's probably just going up, up, up through the pandemic.
Yes, well, the pandemic was one of the things that pushed us into that territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And so I'm guessing that doesn't change a person like you who's super rooted and grounded, but it's got to feel good to just be able to kind of take a deep breath and be like, okay, these years of hard work and passion have paid off for the employees and the investors. Are you guys operating still solely kind of on your own?
Yes. Yeah, we're a subsidiary of them now, but we're still called FlowPlay. Our paychecks still say FlowPlay on them. We still work for FlowPlay. And the idea is that we'll continue to operate individually and maybe have another liquidity event. Maybe we'll take it public at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll combine with other corporations to make an even bigger company.
It's super exciting. And are you working the same, or has it changed because now you feel like you have like subconsciously like a boss or you don't?
No, everything's pretty much the same. I have a call with them every Friday for half an hour just to check in. And so that's about all there is, really. I mean, their mantra to us every time I talk to them is like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's working.
Just make it successful. If we can help you out, if you can help us out, great. But just keep running the business and doing what you're doing.
That's amazing. And so for you personally, outside of your backpacking trips and playing guitar, how are you finding time to relax and unwind and kind of pay attention to your mental health, given kind of the world that we're living in?
Well, I'm trying to get back out there. So I went to Mardi Gras 3 weeks ago.
Nice.
So that was fun. I'm going to Palm Springs next week. So I'm actually trying to do a little bit of traveling again, just to sort of like, get back to normal, get back out there. I'm not sure have you ever heard of the Camino de Santiago? It's a walk across northern Spain.
Oh, I have heard of this. Are you doing that?
I'm doing it at the end of May and the early June.
And how far is that walk?
Well, I'm only going to do 100 miles of it. I'm joining it.
Only 100 miles. I did a 60-mile breast cancer walk, and my feet were like covered in blisters. That's a lot of walking. So how long are you going to do this 100-mile walk? How many days?
5 days.
What do you mean 5 days?
Yeah.
Have you lost your mind? 100 miles in 5 days? What kind of shoes are you wearing?
No, get this. The guy I'm joining, he will have done 400 miles when he joins me.
Oh my God, I need to change my perspective because I'm like exhausted thinking about it. That's amazing. And
Yeah.
so, how many people do this? Is it like an organized, this is the time of year we do it, or you can just do it on your own, or how does this work?
It goes year round, and I think the numbers are about 250,000 people, if I have that
Wow.
correct. Do it every year. There's a whole. I mean, it's been going on for 1,000 years, right? It's ancient.
I want to do that. That's a good, do you keep a kind of like bucket list sounds a little morbid, but do you keep a like, these are the things I want to do every year? A little of this, a little of that.
Oh, I totally have a bucket list. Yeah, Machu Picchu is on my bucket list. I want to go to the Everest base camp in Nepal. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that.
You
that I
got all
wanna do.
sorts of things going, all sorts of things going on. And is there a time that you feel most, I'm guessing it's maybe when you're backpacking, but I'm just curious, like when you feel most in your flow or at peace?
In the outdoors is when I'm most at peace, probably. I mean, I'm super lucky. I live on a lake, so I can look out my window and all I see is water and a little bit of trees across
That's
the
super
way.
peaceful. Yeah.
So that's super peaceful to wake up to every day. So
Yeah.
I get to feel like I'm in the outdoors every day anyway, even when I'm not hiking or backpacking.
Yeah. And you are a father, you have grown children. How
Yep,
many kids do you have?
two,
Two.
boy and
And
girl.
are either one of them like you? Have they followed in your footsteps in either the
Well, they're
gaming or creativity?
yeah, they're both kind of like me, but in opposite ways. Because I'm sort of like this nerdy tech guy, but also this creative guy. So my son is the nerdy tech guy. He's an engineer at Microsoft, and my daughter is getting her master's degree in music
Oh, wow.
from Berkeley School of Music in Valencia, Spain.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
And what does she play?
She plays bass guitar, but mostly her interests are in being a music producer. So she goes into the studio and mixes the music and kind of figures out, okay, well, this is the song, but to really make this song, let's put some keyboard here or put some horns here. And she does the
That's
sort of the
super
arrangement.
cool. How
Yeah.
nice to have that, as a common interest for the two of you to share, father, daughter. I love that.
Funny story for you. So we're in the car one day and we're discussing with Grace, who's 2 years younger than Trevor, and Trevor's already started college in computer science. And we're discussing with Grace, what do you want to major in? She's like, well, we got my on this really cool music program. And we're like, well, that's cool. And my son turns to us and says, wait, nobody ever told me I could go study music.
He's like, computer science. No, let's go music. Oh, that's awesome. Well, my final question for you is what fuels you? But before you answer it, I just have to say that like all the guests that I have on the podcast are amazing, but certain ones I leave and I feel like super energized by all the things I want to do. And so I do need your bucket list because I feel very inspired by all the different and the variety of things that you're doing as far as a fulfilled life. And so I'm sure that our listeners are going to agree with me. It's just been super fun to have you on. So what fuels you, Derrick? What's your ultimate fuel?
What fuels me is learning. So I have lots of different hobbies and lots of activities I'm involved in, but what I discovered was what I like best about all of them is learning something new. So I make my own charcuterie. So I do Italian salamis and all kinds of things, but I never make the same one twice because after I make one and I perfect it, I'm like, okay, I made an amazing prosciutto. So now I know how to make prosciutto.
Wait, you actually make it?
Yeah.
So you just dry it and like,
Yeah,
wow.
I take the 25-pound leg of a hog and I wrap it in salt for a month. And then I hang it in a special chamber I built for 18 months. And after 18 months, it's prosciutto.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I did go to interview with a company once who was interviewing us to hire us to recruit for them. And they said, curiosity and learning is like a huge value for us. And they interviewed a candidate who they were like, meh. And then on the way out, the CEO asked him about like what he likes to do for fun. And he started saying that he's like making his own beer. And he got really like light. He lit up when he was telling the CEO and he was like, it's fine. I can teach him some of the technology gaps. He was like, I just love his passion and interest in learning and curiosity. And then he got into all these other interests. And I just love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So yeah, I got to have a charcuterie plate with you.
Awesome.
and listen to you jam out. So fun to have you on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Well, happy to be here. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.